A Community Research Webinar 2024.
If I can share. So what I've posted in the chat is the discussion notes. They were provided on the registration webinar page, and they also form the basis for thinking our group kōrero later in this session. What I'm going to do is provide a bit of background and a bit of a quick, very brief review of those outputs from that Hui Day, and then we're going to have some reflections from our three speakers, which is Iman Chen, Anjum Raman, and Jagamaya Stritha Ranjit. So just to start off with, I'm just going to provide a quick overview of the Hui, which was Ethnic Research Hui Aotearoa 2023, which took place in September last year. It was a collaborative event co-hosted by the Ministry for Ethnic Communities and Ethnic Research Aotearoa. And I was also involved in the design and organising this event as part of the organising committee. And I'm really pleased that we've got an opportunity to amplify the outputs and the amazing work that was done by the discussion groups and participants at the Hui, and to explore some potential follow-on actions. So there were over 100 participants, and there was a range of researchers, policy people. It was held in Wellington, and part of the rationale for that was to engage as many policy people from central government as possible to attend the Hui, which was free to attend. It started with keynotes from Mervyn Singham, the CEO of the ministry, and Iman Chen as the managing director at Ethnic Research Aotearoa. And this was followed by an opening panel, which included Professor Tracy McIntosh, Dr. Ganesh Nana, and, as I mentioned before, Anjum Raman, who will be speaking a bit later on. I'm going to go through this quite quickly because I've got 12 minutes aside for this segment of the webinar. So, following those presentations, there were expert presentations which related to the 5 key areas for the Hui. And those are the ones that we're going to focus on later. So there was the presentations, and then later on for that day, the participants at the Hui were able to participate in smaller group discussions and visit those different topic areas to build up outputs and conversations about barriers, challenges, what works well, potential for action in the future. So what I'm going to do is briefly follow this order and present the workshopping notes from the Hui for each of these areas as the basis for us then to talk together about. So I would really like to acknowledge the amazing work that was done at that Hui by the participants. This is an example of the notes from the Nothing About Us Without Us topic area on its own. And wonderfully, they also summarised all the sheets together. And I'd just like to briefly talk to this for the Nothing About Us Without Us space. So the summary brought together 6 theme areas. They also highlighted in red the different areas which they felt to place an emphasis on. So that idea of acknowledging expertise, that communities are experts of their own experiences, to recognise lived experience and acknowledge the diversity of that experience and ways of knowing. The importance of leadership, and part of this relates to investing in rangatahi, our young people, as following through, and that includes in terms of mentorship for the future and recognising collective leadership. In terms of differences, that idea again of diverse differences and perspectives and bringing those together is really important for us to have robust outcomes. And in that difference, acknowledging privileges and who's able to participate and who may not be at the table in terms of the focus of your research. being relational rather than transactional, and that really strong trust-building relationship aspect in terms of respect, trust, and reciprocity. The need to share, connect, and amplify, and the need to do it authentically, meaningfully, and really consider who the stakeholders are, and really the positional perspective that the researchers are coming from in terms of the relationship. Now, when I saw this write-up, it really resonated with me in terms of work that the community research group has. So I just wanted to note this so that we don't end up with duplications, and that our efforts are used efficiently, I suppose. And I didn't realise this either, that community research actually has a code of practice, and that is a code of practice for undertaking community research. And many of those things here are reflected in this, and vice versa. And so one of the things I will take away from this and do further work on, and which also others might like to be involved in depending on how the discussions go later, is thinking about the crossover between these two. And this is the summary page in terms of the 5 po, or pillars, which underpin the code of practice around whanaungatanga relationships, rangatiratanga, which is governance and leadership, manaakitanga, which is about that caring and accountability, kotahitanga, that sense of collective endeavour, and embeddedness, which is that these values, or po, should be part of the research endeavour from the start to the end, and the follow-on in terms of use of research information, etc. So that's all I'm going to say on that, because I'm very conscious of the time. Ethnic data sovereignty. So the different smaller groups had outputs or write-ups which reflected different ways of thinking and talking about the space. Here, what I've done, just to help, I suppose, simplify how we talk about these things, and also because of time, is I've just put sort of general themes really in 3 clusters. And one is the whole idea of strengthening and working together collaboratively and leveraging off each other. And again, that relationships aspect. And the second one, data efficiencies, their reference to, avoiding duplication, maximising our use of sources and resources, and that whole idea of that having a richer evidence base from the work that we do. And then the final one, really, this was actually the space where there was sort of references more to tensions in terms of progressing what is done. And so I've put reciprocal respect here. There are barriers and challenges, and you'll see some of those noted here, especially in the red. Need to work and progress together in a spirit of peace, and a constructive, positive spirit, rather than one of tension of, differences in view. I suppose this is one where the power dynamics and the different sector dynamics come into play a bit more as well. Results dissemination, evidence use by practitioners and policymakers. So this was a summary provided as an output, and it talked about, so from the lists which they summarised up, the idea of accessibility. Where can we find the results of community research? The need for plain language translation, and in terms of that idea of being able to connect, as you'll see the networking there, with policymakers, especially central government. There's that whole geography aspect of Auckland-based, Wellington-based, and those kinds of aspects. The importance of networking, and that idea of potentially secondments into government, so that understanding of each other in the different spaces, accountability, and awareness. And I think one of the key things here is the political environment in terms of what are the key issues of the day, and focus for government and local government, etc. And how does that sort of align or resonate with what communities research is sort of saying, and how that is able to be picked up and able to be acted upon. And actually, how can we add it to the agenda as part of that political environment? Networks and active collaboration. So again, there was an approach of sort of putting up ideas and concepts and thoughts. And I've again themed those across 3. So that sense of belonging, really, in terms of networking and actively working together, of being included, of ethnic communities being represented and reflected, of that connection, and that extends to connection with other say with Māori as tangata whenua, and that sense of belonging. A strong theme is apparent here in terms of having common goals, of working towards positive change and positive outcomes. And then the third sort of cluster, I suppose, is around that whole idea of what are we generating in terms of, and what the focus is in terms of funding and leadership and being able to build capabilities and have new ideas and for intergenerational change. So that's the future focus of of connecting for the future. In terms of the funding, and when we have our discussion groups, I've brought together the funding and the collaboration kind of themes, because it was a strong overlap as well with the outputs, and also just in terms of the constraint of the webinar workshop format. And in that area, they looked at funding gaps, barriers to funding, ideas, and this is one of the pages. And I think for our focus in Kororo later today, I think what I've done is pulled up the responses that brought together the reflecting of how can we leverage existing funding to meet the needs of ethnic communities. And so I've distilled those bullets, really, I haven't changed any of the bullets, into the three areas of, as I was saying, a strong focus on collaboration as a way of leveraging through researchers and ethnic community groups together and using that as a challenge to access more funding. In the public sector, collaboration across agencies so that there can be common priorities to fund. Across communities to secure funding at a larger scale, and coalescing around issues to gain traction. So it may be that different ethnic community groups can come together to create sort of a connected research project for funding, to try and gain funding. That whole idea of visibility, so existing funding and existing research and possibly a funding database. And you could see in the previous screen, there was the beginnings of the key funding pools that one could apply to. And then a strategic approach in terms of how can you be creative, I suppose, in how you frame the research so that it does meet the existing criteria. And also the idea actually of bringing the ethnic communities kind of lens to larger research projects so that it becomes a part of a broader funding approach, and augmenting that. So that was a really fast run through of the sort of outputs from the Hui in September last year. What I'm going to do now.
A Community Research Webinar 2024.
I pikitia ai ki te rangi tūhaha ki te tihi o manono.